Emile tried to ban my parents from our wedding, manipulated my wife, but we exposed her, and now she's banned from all family events. I, 29M, have been married to my wife Jess, 28F, for a year now. But getting to this point was way harder than I'd expected, mostly because of one person, her mother. From the start, Emile never thought I was good enough for Jess. Jess's dad passed away when she was young, so her mom basically raised her alone and became extremely controlling in the process. She didn't just want the best for Jess. She wanted to decide everything about her life, including who she'd end up with. So when Jess and I got serious, her mom saw it as some kind of threat. It all started off with little comments, snide, passive-aggressive digs. Emile would say things like, "I just imagine Jess with someone who has ambition," or, "I guess you don't mind if Jess ends up taking care of you financially?" That was the main issue for her, money. She was from a wealthy family, while I grew up middle class, working to make ends meet. I'd worked hard to get where I was, and Jess didn't care about the difference, but her mom definitely did. Emile's attitude wasn't just about me, though. It was about controlling Jess. Jess was raised to think she had to keep the peace with her mom, so she mostly just let things slide, hoping Emile would eventually accept me. I didn't want to make Jess choose, so I put up with Emile's antics and tried not to let it get to me. But then came the engagement, and Emile really took things up a notch. When Jess and I got engaged, Emile offered to pay for part of the wedding as a gift. I was hesitant, but Jess thought it might be her way of finally accepting us as a couple, so we agreed. Almost immediately, Emile started acting like she was planning her own wedding. She took over decisions without even asking us. She booked a high-end venue she liked, added a bunch of people we barely knew to the guest list, and even picked the color scheme, which was, let's just say, not our style. When Jess told her mom we wanted a smaller wedding, Emile brushed her off, saying, "Oh, you'll change your mind. You only do this once." Jess tried to reason with her, but Emile wouldn't back down. And every time Jess stood up for us, Emile would call her ungrateful and guilt-trip her about the money. Things got even worse when we looked at the guest list Emile put together. My parents weren't on it. At first, I thought maybe Emile just made a mistake, but no. When Jess asked, her mom admitted she didn't want them there because she thought they weren't classy enough for her friends. She actually said, "If you want a respectable wedding, you can't invite people who don't know how to act in those kinds of settings." I was stunned. My parents are hardworking, decent people. They loved Jess like their own daughter, and to hear her mom talk about them like that was beyond insulting. When Jess confronted her about it, Emile said, "Fine, let them come, but don't expect me to take the blame when they embarrass you." Jess tried her best to stand up for my family, but her mom made it clear she'd never respect them. A couple of weeks later, Emile called Jess in tears, saying she overheard my parents talking about how they thought they'd hit the jackpot with Jess, that they planned to live off her family's money somehow. Jess was confused and upset, but she didn't fully believe it. But Emile kept repeating things my parents supposedly said, painting them as gold diggers who were only supportive of us because of what they'd get out of it. When Jess told me, I saw exactly what her mom was doing. I knew my parents would never say anything like that. They were happy I'd found someone who made me happy. But Emile had planted that seed of doubt in Jess, and it started causing tension between us. Jess didn't know what to think anymore, and I was getting angrier by the day. Finally, I told Jess that if her mom was going to lie about my family, we had to confront her directly. Jess agreed, and we set up a meeting with Emile to get everything out in the open. We went to Emile's house and sat her down. I asked her point blank to repeat the things she'd claimed my parents said. Emile looked uncomfortable, but she didn't back down. She started saying all these awful things about how my parents were greedy and just looking for a free ride. Jess was visibly upset, and that's when I pulled out a recording I'd taken the last time I spoke to my mom, where she talked about how happy she was that Jess was joining our family. There was no talk of money, just my mom's genuine happiness and excitement for us. I played the recording for Emile and Jess. Emile's face turned red, and she started backpedaling, saying that she'd misinterpreted things, that she must have heard wrong. But the damage was done. Jess finally saw her mom's true intentions and told her right then and there that if she couldn't respect my family, she was no longer welcome in our lives. Emile started crying and trying to guilt-trip her, but Jess was done. She told her mom she was uninvited from the wedding and any future events unless she could show us genuine respect. After this confrontation, Emile kept pulling these stunts to try and manipulate us. Here are just a few examples. 1. Naming our future children. After the engagement, Emile started hinting about names for our future kids. Names from her side of the family, of course. She kept pushing this idea that we should name a son after her late husband to carry on his legacy. When Jess tried to tell her that we'd choose names ourselves, Emile said, "Well, family names are tradition." Jess finally told her that we wouldn't be consulting her on names. Emile stopped talking about it, but the resentment was clear. 2. Redecorating our house. When we bought our first house, Emile sent over furniture and art without asking us. She'd call Jess saying, "I'm just helping you make it presentable," and would act offended if Jess didn't like her choices. The worst was this huge antique coffee table that didn't match anything in our house. Jess finally told her that if she kept sending stuff we hadn't approved, we'd just return it. Emile was furious, saying Jess was throwing away family heirlooms, but after that, the gifts stopped. 3. Trying to get a spare key. Emile asked for a key to our new home for emergencies, but we knew she'd use it to drop by unannounced. Jess explained that no one would be getting a spare key, and Emile threw a fit, saying, "I'm just looking out for you." But Jess stuck to it, telling her that respecting our boundaries would make everyone feel safer. Emile had no choice but to accept it, but she wasn't happy. A year after the wedding, Jess was pregnant, and we started planning a baby shower. Emile tried to take over completely. She made a guest list full of her own friends and picked an expensive venue without asking us. When Jess told her mom we decided to have a small shower at a friend's house, Emile lost it. She accused Jess of rejecting family support and said she'd have to host her own shower to properly celebrate her grandchild. Jess stood her ground, and Emile eventually showed up to the shower but sulked the entire time. At one point, Emile suggested we let her manage a savings account for us. She acted like she was trying to help, but it was clear she wanted to control our finances. Jess politely declined, saying we had everything covered. Emile didn't let it go, though. She kept dropping hints about how we could use some guidance. Jess finally told her that our finances were none of her business. Emile was furious, but had no choice but to back off. The baby was born, and Emile immediately started with the unsolicited parenting advice. She criticized every decision we made, from the type of crib we bought to how we dressed the baby. She even showed up unannounced a few times, just to help, but we set a rule that she had to call first or we wouldn't open the door. After a couple of times of being turned away, she got the message. But despite everything, Emile still tried to get back in our lives through guilt and manipulation. She sent messages like, "I'm missing out on everything," or "I just want to be part of the family." At first, Jess felt guilty, but she eventually realized that Emile only wanted back in if she could have control. Jess decided to go low contact, and we both stopped letting Emile's calls and texts dictate our lives. Jess put her foot down, and so did I. She told her mom point blank that if she wanted a relationship, it had to be on our terms, with respect. But, of course, Emile couldn't handle that. Then came the family emergency. Out of nowhere, Emile claimed she was sick and needed help, saying that family always comes through in hard times. Jess was upset and considered rushing over, but I reminded her to ask some questions first, like what kind of illness and if there was anyone else in the family who could help. Emile danced around the details, saying she just needed her daughter there for emotional support. Jess was conflicted, but she also knew this was another attempt to get her to abandon her boundaries. In the end, she told Emile we'd be there if it was a real emergency, but otherwise, she'd need to figure things out herself. After the family emergency turned out to be another way to test us, we had enough. Jess and I sat down and laid out strict boundaries. No unannounced visits. No guilt-tripping about family events. No more trying to control our choices, finances, or parenting. And most of all, respect for both of our families. We made it clear that if she crossed any line, there would be consequences. Emile pushed back, naturally. She tried a few more guilt trips, like, "You're tearing this family apart, and you're isolating Jess from her own mother." Jess and I were prepared this time. We told her that we wouldn't be dragged back into her control. The next time she crossed a line, Jess told her, We'd cut contact altogether until she showed real change. For a while, things were quiet, and Emile kept her distance. But true to form, she couldn't hold back for long. She tried dropping by again, unannounced, with some excuse about wanting to see the baby. Jess stood her ground and turned her away at the door, telling her firmly that she had to respect the boundaries we'd set. That seemed to hit home because Emile finally stopped testing us. She realized that Jess wasn't that easily manipulated anymore, and we weren't afraid to shut her out if we had to. Since putting up these walls, life's been calmer. Jess is finally able to enjoy her life without worrying about Emile's constant judgment and interference. She's also learned to stop feeling guilty about putting us first. We've focused on building our family the way we want, and we're finally free of Emile's control. Now, we have a solid support network, and Jess has reconnected with some family members who, it turns out, had their own issues with Emile's behavior over the years. It's been healing for her to know she wasn't alone, and seeing others stand up to Emile has only reinforced that we made the right choice. Our life is far from perfect, but without Emile's drama constantly hanging over us, things are so much better. Jess is happier, and we both feel more in control of our lives. Emile still occasionally tries to sneak in with a message or a call, but we keep our boundaries firm. If she genuinely changes one day, maybe things could improve, but we're done waiting for that. In the end, we learned that family doesn't mean letting someone treat you like a doormat. We don't owe anyone our peace, not even family. And as much as Emile tried to control us, it's finally clear that she's not in charge of our lives. Here's to keeping our family strong, on our terms for good.